I turned one of the most popular slasher movie franchises of all time into a one-shot manga. For starters, I wanted to get straight into the creative process because I needed to get this done before the end of the month, since I wanted it uploaded just in time for Halloween. If you couldn't tell by my channel name, I'm quite the sucker for Halloween, and I really wanted to show some holiday spirit by creating something spooky but also familiar. I've always loved the Scream movies, and I wanted to create something related to Ghostface for a while now. So let's get straight to it. I first tried figuring out what scene or idea I can portray in a very short fashion, so I was looking through different Scream movies and was trying to find an iconic scene I could try and remake in my art style. I then had the bright idea, why not remake the first ever scene in the first movie? It's a short intro to the series, and it does a great job at reeling in the viewers, whilst also keeping us on edge and excited for what's next. It also happens to be one of the most iconic slasher moments in the history of cinema, so I think it's definitely a great place to start. I obviously didn't want to copy it word for word, so I just rewatched the scene a few times and got a grasp for the main ideas that I could use in my version, whilst also making it different and more fast-paced. Reading a manga and watching a movie are two completely different things, so I really wanted this to be short and sweet and get the reader straight into the action. I started drawing right away with an opening full-page panel of the house to set the scene of the area. The story takes place in Woodsboro, California, and the setting is Halloween night. I started drawing in the main focal point, that being the house, the trees, and also the shrubbery surrounding it. I genuinely enjoyed this process and use it as an opportunity to practice my backgrounds, since it's something I feel like I need to improve on. I added in all the extra details, rendered it, and colored everything in to match with the manga-styled grayscale theme, and was super pleased with how it turned out so far. I then moved straight onto the next page, which starts off with a panel of Casey baking popcorn on her stove. It was a burner stove, so I had to carefully try and draw in this weird shape over and over until it looked right, and then I added in the bag of popcorn sitting on top of it. I then desperately, for the love of everything I know, tried to draw in this hand and I just couldn't. I even stepped back, took a small break, walked around my house like an NPC and still couldn't get it right. I decided to just give in and use the Clip Studio assets and find a hand model that I could use to get the right shape and continue from there. If I hadn't used this model asset right now, I would still have been sitting here to this day trying to get this hand right, and this video would have never existed. Anyways, the next panel is of Casey humming and cooking her popcorn. I wanted a shot of her smiling and enjoying her night, as who wouldn't be if they were making some delicious popcorn on Halloween. I then wanted to make sure that after drawing in the details of her face and hair to add a rotary phone in the background of the scene. I knew that this phone was going to play a huge role in the story like the original did, so I placed it just out of focus but still visible behind her. I then added in little music note effects to add in the idea that she's humming, and moved on to the rendering of the panel along with fixing up some line art depth, adding some additional details, and kinda just cleaning it up overall. I was starting to get excited with the process and knew how I wanted this manga to turn out, so seeing it take shape as I created more pages was a huge relief. I then moved straight onto the third page, which is a still panel of the phone on a table. I wanted to create two panels on this page of the phone, one where it's quiet and the other where it starts ringing. I knew with certain effects I could draw and add in post that I can make this phone look like it's making noise within a drawing. I started drawing the rotary phone and added in every little detail that was necessary, like the numbers and the shading of the shape of the phone. I then shaded in the background and added all the tiny little details. I copy and pasted what I'd already done to keep the accuracy of the first panel and place it in the confines of the second one. I then drew vibration lines around the phone to indicate that it's moving rapidly, and then added speed lines surrounding it as well to draw the attention into the phone itself. After finishing the first two panels, I drew the final panel of the page being Casey's eyes. She's turning her eyes towards the direction of the phone and is curious as to who is calling her at this time of night. She was home alone and was waiting for her boyfriend to come over, so she answered it thinking it might be him trying to get in contact with her. This panel was another good shot for this story since I got to practice drawing Casey in my art style once again. I used my own drawing as a reference since I didn't want to lose the consistency and have the story fall apart because of my lack of attention to detail. I added in the shading and extra things that give it character like I did before and took a short break, since I had basically been spending all day drawing already. I wanted this project done before Halloween, and I have about 1 week to make that deadline. If you made it to this point in the video and want to prove that you aren't skipping to the end to see the final result, comment Ghost Pickle, so I know that you're a real one. Anyways, back to the manga. I started drawing in the 4th page and had the idea in my head for a long conversation that happened throughout this section of the story. I wanted it to have lots of panels that sway in and out of each other like a movie does, where the frames kind of skip to shots of the house or different things in the area, to give more context to the scene and environment, to make it feel less still. I drew the first panel of Casey answering the phone and starting the conversation. This shot didn't really need a background since the main focus was on Casey and who is calling her. I added small little soundbar effects to show that there's someone speaking on the other end of the phone, and planned to make it so that her text bubbles appear white, whilst the person on the phone's text bubbles appear black. This concept makes it easier to understand and follow along with who is saying what, since I can't directly have the person on the other end of the phone on the screen at this moment. The next few panels were shots of the area inside her house like I mentioned earlier. I wanted to replicate panning shots of the environment like they do in films, so I did just that. I drew a table with a television on it and a cute window in the back. Then the next panel was similar, but with some shelves with books and a small reading chair. After cleaning up both of these panels, I moved on to the last panel of the page, which was a half shot of Casey's face as she smiles since the conversation she's having on the phone is turning out rather enjoyable, for now. I drew in the same features that she's had throughout the other pages, and tried to make sure that she was depicted accurately in a manga art style in comparison to the original actor Drew Barrymore. I think I captured her hairstyle and outfit quite well with the manga look, and continued to move on to the second last page. I wanted this short story to be 6 pages long to match with the theme of Scream since there are only currently 6 Scream movies out. I also wanted this to be a quick read and something I could easily post on my Webtoon and Twitter, so both of these will be linked down below if you're interested in seeing these in full quality, but make sure to stick around to see the process in its entirety beforehand. After I was done with rendering the details of this page, I moved on to the next one. This was going to be quite the interesting panel as I wanted to draw Casey reacting frightened to what she just heard on the phone, as well as I wanted to create like a shadowy figure behind her staring at her through the window. This scene had lots of character and was one of the most important panels of this short story since it was the peak. The main character has now become scared of what's to come, and we finally get a glimpse at the sinister character in the background lurking in the shadows. I knew her expression would be extremely different rather than her regular look, and I tried to make that apparent. This was a face of pure terror. It wasn't just a simple spook to her, it was her life on the line. Oh, that was such a bad dad joke. Besides that, after completing this panel, I started the second last one of the story. I wanted to draw Ghostface smashing his arm through the window with a knife in his hand. I was able to properly capture the feeling and motion of the shattering perfectly, and I think this panel is one of my favorites so far. Even though it is extremely simple, it did exactly what I wanted it to do. I had this crushed glass brush that I kind of like spread out around the window's breaking point and then manually drew in the areas that he broke through with my regular brush to give it kind of like the same art style as the rest of the pages prior. I then used a white brush over top the dark areas of his cloak that I wanted to add lighting to, since in manga this is a commonly used method to add shine to dark objects. I then started working on the final page of this short story, and I took direct inspiration from multiple poses that Ghostface has done throughout the movies, and landed on the arm in the air swinging motion that he usually does when he's like about to attack. I started with a rough outline of his mask and torso, and then moved on to filling it in with my lasso tool. I then used black all around to properly capture his dark outfit, and did the same method I had done prior with the white brush to capture the shine. I also noticed that in the first Scream movie, his cloak has lots of tiny sparkles in the fabric. I was able to add this in as well, which gave the cloak much more character. Once I felt happy with the idea and kept moving forward with it, I decided it would be a really cool effect to have him popping out of the page past the guidelines of the manga panels. I see this effect done a lot in other stories, and why not incorporate it in myself to give it a more action-styled moment. After I finished cleaning up all the line art and completing the extra details and additional effects, I was done. Here's a quick scroll of the entire manga. I know it's a bit of a short one, but it was a good practice and a lot of fun to do whilst working on other projects I have in the work for you guys. Anyways, as I said earlier, if you're interested in reading it in full quality, I'm going to have it linked down below on WEBTOON and my Patreon. And if you want to keep up with me easily and have access to interacting with me and the community, I started a Twitter account. Thanks so much for watching, and have a happy Halloween.